The 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games is wrapping up. It's been, well, one would say one of the strangest games ever, with no spectators and lots of COVID-19 protocols. How strange? Memorable moments? Let's bring in somebody who is in the know, our correspondent in Japan, Phoebe Amoroso. She joins us now live. Phoebe, great to have you on the program. So as the games wrap up, what does it feel like in Tokyo right now?
In Tokyo, it's a bit of some complicated feelings on the street. I've actually just been outside the Olympic Stadium, and there are people braving some of the rain earlier, taking photos of the venue, really excited that this is the final day. But of course, people are also concerned about the rise in coronavirus cases. They've been hitting a record high, over 15,000 nationwide. Here in Japan, though, the medal haul has been fantastic, beating all records that the country has seen before. And of course, the baseball victory against the US is really big news. So the mood is buoyant, but at the same time, a bit concerned.
Yeah. Talk to us about some of the standout features over the past couple of weeks of this Games.
Standout features, well, as you mentioned, holding a Games in the midst of a pandemic has been a big challenge. So, of course, athletes have to leave 2 days after their final performance, final tournament, and that's had a big impact on the atmosphere. There's been no celebrations in that sense, but we have seen some new features introduced to the Olympics, like mixed gender relays on the track and swimming. The IOC has very much been pushing gender equality. Almost 50% of athletes were also women, so that's been a big feature, as well as new sports, skateboarding, sports climbing, surfing, and here, of course, Japan is the birthplace of karate, and many were very pleased to see that debut. There has been some concerns over the extreme heat here combined with humidity, but at the same time we have seen athletes break world records, so it really has been a bit of a mixed ride through these very unusual circumstances.
Look, in certain parts of South Africa we used to high temperatures, but give our audience a sense of what athletes were going through in Tokyo with regards to the heat.
Yes, well, within the first weekend, a Russian archer did fall down from heat stroke. A Spanish tennis player also had to be wheeled off the court. It's not just the case of high temperatures, but the humidity is extremely high, and that combination, combined as well as medical health experts have been warning that people have to wear masks outside of the time when they're also competing, and that also has an effect. People feel like they can't able to breathe. So that we have seen the start times of many tournaments be adjusted in a reflection of that. There are international committees that represent, for example, triathlon, and there have been discussions. The start time was moved back for several events earlier to try and start earlier in the morning. But given that the marathon, for example, was moved to Japan's northern island, that is normally about 5 degrees cooler on average.
Right.
But the temperatures were hitting over 30 degrees every day. There have been some serious questions as to whether it was sensible to hold the Games during this time, particularly given that when Tokyo last hosted the Olympic Games in 1964, they were held in October to beat Japan's notoriously difficult summer.
Phoebe, memorable moments of the Games. What stood out for people? What are people talking about still?
Well, certainly here in the host country of Japan, there have been many memorable moments with the softball and baseball winning gold. And also Japan did upset China's dominance in table tennis in the mixed doubles. They won a gold in that. Then there's the sheer young age of competitors in these new sports. Skateboarding, the youngest athlete on the podium was just 12 years old. We've also seen some really heartwarming moments. Qatar and Italy in the men's high jump, sharing the gold medal as they just could not be separated. Then for the Philippines, Hidilyn Diaz became the first athlete, a weightlifter, to win a gold medal for the country. So there's a huge amount of pride there. But there's been many surprising moments as well. For example, US gymnast Simone Biles, she pulled out of most of her final competition, citing mental health concerns, but then returned for the balance beam, winning a bronze medal, which many saw as a very much a triumphant comeback. And then outside of sporting performances, Belarusian sprinter Kristina Simanuskaya defected to Poland over critical comments that she made on Instagram regarding the national coaches. So there have been some big surprises both on and both inside the venues and outside of the venues as well.
Look, it's a huge sporting event, and the host city was under a state of emergency. You can confirm with us if it still is the case. We saw COVID cases rising. Do we have a count of how many athletes dropped out because of COVID?
Not exact count. It's actually quite difficult to keep track of who has dropped out, because several dropped out before arriving in Japan, and then after arriving in Japan, and then after entering the Olympic Village. So the way that the IOC and the organisers have been looking at COVID cases is that screening tests at the airport, and then screening tests after athletes have checked into the village and have started their training here. So the positivity rate for those at the airport is 0.08%, so slightly higher for people entering the country, but only 0.02% for those who've already started competing. So overall, there have been 430 games-related cases, and numbers have been incredibly low. The IOC has said that this has generally beaten expectations. The whole organisation of the event has beaten expectations. But as for Japan, there are some questions over just what impact the Olympics has had on this unprecedented rise in coronavirus cases. Over 15,000 cases were recorded nationwide yesterday. That's the highest on record. Whilst there's no evidence for a direct effect, some medical experts have been saying that indirectly it's contributed to people not really feeling the risk of the virus, going out more rather than staying at home, and that this could have contributed indirectly to the spread. What is concerning is that experts are saying that the number of cases here in Japan has yet to peak, and that may have a knock-on effect on the Paralympics Games, which are scheduled to start on August the 24th.
So what's next? What happens now?
What happens now? That is a big question. In terms of preparations, they will have to go ahead for the Paralympic Games. There are still questions over spectators. We saw no spectators at this game, and this really contributed to a lack of atmosphere. Japan has been expanding its coronavirus restrictions to 8 more areas just this week. However, there's a sign that these measures are no longer effective. The measures involve businesses closing by 8 p.m, restaurants are not allowed to serve alcohol, and asking people to work from home as much as possible. But this is now the 4th state of emergency that Tokyo is under, and it's been dragging on for so long that people have not really been sticking as strictly to these essentially just the guidelines. They're not legally enforced. And then there's the Delta variant, which is believed to be behind the sharp increase in the number of cases. So there are some questions of how preparations are going to go, given that Japan is in a very precarious position.
All right, Phoebe, rather. Sophie Mokoena is on my brain. Phoebe, thank you very much indeed for your time and your reporting. Appreciate it there. That's our correspondent in Japan there.